Take one from there. That's perfect. No, just take one. Okay, we'll put it up there. And I'll swallow. Just swallow.
Gata for the sound of the bell. Mind calm, body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment benevolent. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of nonviolent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Om Amoga Vairochana Mahamudra Mani Padme Shivala Pravartaya
Please take a moment to straighten your mats and cushions and then stand together for chanting of the refuges. Bringing our hands palm to palm. Just taking a moment to check in, feeling your feet on the carpet, on the wooden floor. So we will first take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in Sino-Korean, in keeping with our tradition, and then a second time in English. So just throw your voice in with the sound if you're not sure of the words. I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha,
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
I will cultivate the heart of enlightenment
And realize the great way.
and realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma,
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings.
I will penetrate the teachings
And uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha.
I go for refuge to the Sangha,
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many,
And transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return to your places now for another shorter period of meditation, about 5 minutes. please join me in some simple stretching exercises to finish our meditation period. Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. My name is Jagwa, and I'm one of the Dharma teachers here in Ann Arbor. So it's nice to see so many people here. Is anyone here for the first time? Oh, wow. Well, welcome. So I'm going to start with a brief passage from the Diamond Sutra, which is one of the most famous Buddhist scriptures. And we've been reading portions of this as part of a regular practice to honor the passing of our founding teacher, Venerable Samu Sunum, whose picture you see up here on the altar. So this is a dialogue between the Buddha and one of his followers whose name is Subhuti, so that you can follow along sort of what the gist is. The Lord, wherever there are characteristics, there is error. Wherever there are no characteristics, there is no error. The Tathagata is to be seen where there are no characteristics. Subhuti, in the future when this is said, will anyone understand? The Lord, do not speak in that way, Subhuti. Even in the last 500 years during the decay of the good law, there will be those who will understand. There will be bodhisattvas, great beings, who will not have served or planted their roots of merit under just one Buddha. On the contrary, they will have honored many thousands of Buddhas, and they will, on hearing this teaching, obtain the same pure mind. They are known by the Tathagata through his Buddha knowledge, seen by his Buddha eye. They are fully known by the Tathagata Subhuti, and they will gain an immeasurable and incalculable amount of merit. And why? Because these bodhisattvas are free from the notion of a self, a being, a person. They are free from having notions and from not having notions. If there did exist the notion of anything in those bodhisattvas, they would be attached to the notion of a self, a being, a person. This is the hidden meaning of my teaching of the raft. Those who know that the teaching of the good law is like a raft abandon it. How much more do they abandon that which is not the teaching? What do you think, Subhuti? Has anything been realized or taught by the Tathagata which can be called the highest perfect enlightenment? Subhuti, no, Lord, there is nothing which can be called highest perfect enlightenment, nor can anything be taught about it. Highest perfect enlightenment is ungraspable and inexpressible. It is neither something nor nothing, and yet those on the path are inseparable from it. So this morning, as I was getting ready to come, my husband called down from the basement where he was starting to do the laundry and said, your gray clothes are in the laundry basket. Do you need them? They didn't get washed from last week, and I put them on this morning dirty, and there was still a scent of wood smoke from last weekend because we led a ritual for Ulambana Day, which is to honor people who have departed, or maybe people that we have difficulties with and wish to have some communication with, whether they are alive or not. And so it seemed kind of fitting because the last few weeks after the passing of our teacher, Samo Sunam, who died the first weekend in August, Haju has been sharing about some of her experience being with him in his last days. And we've been reading the Diamond Sutra, we had Ulambana Day, and so it feels like a very kind of pregnant time to be talking about impermanence. And so when I had lunch earlier this week with a friend, and I had actually briefly forgotten that I was giving the talk this weekend. Ma'um reminded me, and I was telling my friend at lunch, well, I'm giving a talk this weekend at the Zen temple, and he said, oh, do you need any help with it? I said, well, I think it's going to be about death. And he said, oh, well, never mind then. And so I think that's maybe the reason why that this is the right talk. That kind of feeling of, oh, well, never mind. What can I say about that? So I'm going to try. And one thing too, just to kind of set the scene, many of you would not have ever met Samo Sunam. I myself only met him a handful of times. He lived in New York and Toronto and Mexico City, kind of in the last years of his life. But for those of you who don't know very much about him, he helped found this temple and others around North America. This particular temple was founded in the early 1980s. And so in a very real way, you are all here because of him, even if you didn't know that. So just keep that in mind. It's sort of an interesting question. How is that possible? I don't even know this person. So for today, I'd like to share a little bit about one of the kind of one of the teachings of Buddhism, the Five Remembrances, which Ma'um had talked about that first weekend of Sunam's passing. And they're in the Moon Journeying Through Clouds, our liturgy book. If you'd like to read them, we have some copies in the lobby. But I went back and looked at the sutra, the Buddhist scripture that those reflections come from. So I'm going to read a little bit of that. And then I also was just reflecting on the fact that, many of us maybe have never accompanied a dying person. I myself have not. I've been with people after they have lost someone and are grieving. But I was really touched by Haju's story last weekend of what it was like to accompany Sunam in the last hours of his life. And so because I do not have a personal story, I wanted to share a couple of stories from two Buddhist practitioners who I really admire. And they are accompanying people in these stories. So you'll hear a couple of short stories from Natalie Goldberg and Norman Fisher. So that's kind of the big picture. How does that sound? Okay. So before I get into the Five Remembrances, which are in a lot of ways about contemplating our own impermanence, our own mortality, as well as the impermanence of this world around us. And not in the sense of a nihilistic perspective. Well, nothing really matters then, right? Sometimes if you're hearing this for the first time, you might think, wow, so if that's the truth, then what am I supposed to make of that, right? But the Buddhist perspective is that this type of a reflection is really about kind of tenderizing the heart, where we are waking up to that essential reality of things are always changing. And that can allow us to live in better harmony with our circumstances, to devote ourselves to things that serve ourselves and others in healthy ways. And so I'll talk a little bit about that too. But what got me thinking about this was I had this memory of coming to service several years ago, and I think I came in late. And I had forgotten that it was Parinirvana Day, which is the special service that we do to commemorate the death of the Buddha. And in our ritual, there is a part at the beginning where people kneel on the carpet and perform a ritual of grieving. We call it the wailing choir or the wailing chorus. So I've since participated in this, and I can't remember at the time when I came late to that service if I had seen it before. It's quite arresting because it's very loud, and it's just oh, and it can sound a little bit at first if you're not really putting your whole heart into it, like you're kind of in a haunted house or something like that. So I was a little uncertain when I came in what was going on. And then as I was listening to just the vowel sounds and recognizing that this ritual was about what the monks expressed upon the shock and sorrow of losing their great teacher, I had the realization, maybe not for the first time, but it felt more real that, oh yes, my teacher is going to die one day too. I really understand now what they're crying about. And so it just made it so much more real to me. And I think because of that embodied expression that allowed me to recognize that. So in the spirit of that, I want to share the Five Remembrances because since then, when I've participated in that wailing choir, I have that memory of what that would feel like. And it feels much more real and much more poignant to express that. So I'm going to read a little bit from a sutra called the let's see if I can say it, Upajjhatana Sutta, I believe, Subjects for Contemplation. So this is the Buddha giving instruction on 5 things he says everyone should contemplate. There are these 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. Which 5? I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. I am subject to illness. I have not gone beyond illness. I am subject to death. I have not gone beyond death. I will grow different and separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbiter. Whatever I do, for good or evil, to that will I fall heir. These are the 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. And then there's a little bit of further instruction, sort of explaining, well, why are these the 5 things that one should spend a lot of time reflecting on? Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to aging, have gone beyond aging? There are beings who are intoxicated with a typical use intoxication with youth. And because of that intoxication with youth, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that youth's intoxication with youth will be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And so he goes through each of those, similarly reinforcing, if you reflect on these, your attachment to those as a permanent state will be seen for what it is, which is not a permanent state. There's one other part I wanted to read. Yeah. Now, a disciple of the noble ones considers this. I am not the only one subject to aging who has not gone beyond aging. To the extent that there are beings, past and future, passing away and re-arising, all beings are subject to aging, have not gone beyond it. When one often reflects on this, the factors of the path take birth. They stick with that path, develop it, cultivate it. As they stick with that path, develop it, and cultivate it, the fetters are abandoned, the obsessions destroyed. And so I think one way I might attempt to add a little bit of commentary there is that line about, I am not the only one. It's sort of what I felt coming in and hearing that wailing choir. Oh, this applies to me too, you know. And in particular in Zen, which is part of the Mahayana school of Buddhism, we have this, this belief that every being has the capacity to awaken. We call it Buddha nature, that it's innate. And I think for me, reading those 5 remembrances is sort of like the exclamation point on Buddha nature. It's like not only does each being have this amazing capacity to awaken, we have this impermanent body, this impermanent life. So wow, that adds a lot of sense of urgency about the whole thing and a lot of sense of poignancy and tenderness. Time is short. Although, of course, we would have another chance in the next lifetime. And those 5 remembrances also are said to kind of point at another core teaching of Buddhism, which is something we call the 3 marks of existence. So you'll notice there's a lot of numbered lists of things to help you remember them. 3 marks of existence. So those are impermanence, which I've been talking about, non-self, which we could say is sort of the recognition that this is not a fixed self. What I believe is me and mine is always shifting, and I'm much more interconnected to other parts of the world than I might immediately recognize. And then the reality of the fact that the human condition brings with it a sense of unsatisfactoriness a lot of the time, a sense that when we're going after something, maybe we don't get the result that we thought. We experience suffering. The things that we think will make us happy aren't always the things that do. And that there's this sense of seeking after a balance that can be a really core human drive. And sometimes we seek after that balance in a skillful way and sometimes in unskillful ways. So I wanted to read a little bit more from Norman Fisher's book, which I think I read to you from a few weeks ago. This is a wonderful collection of essays. He's a North American Zen teacher. When you greet me, I bow. And he has a section on impermanence. It is very telling that some religions refer to death as eternal life, and that in the Mahaparinirvana Sutta, the Buddha doesn't die, he enters parinirvana, full extinction, which is something other than death. In Buddhism generally, death isn't death, it's a staging area for further life. There are a lot of older people in the Buddhist communities in which I practice. Some are in their 70s and 80s, others in their 60s, like me. Because of this, the theme of death and impermanence is always on our minds and seems to come up again and again in the teachings that we study. All conditioned things pass away. Nothing remains as it was. The body changes and weakens as it ages. In response to this, and to a lifetime's experience, the mind changes as well. The way one thinks of, views, and feels about life and the world is different. Even the same thoughts one had in youth or midlife take on a different flavor when held in older age. The other day, a friend about my age, who in her youth studied Zen with the great Korean master Sung Sanim, told me, he always said, soon dead. I understood the words then as being true, very Zen and almost funny. Now they seem personal and poignant. Death may be the ultimate loss, the ultimate impermanence, but even on a lesser everyday scale, impermanence and the loss it entails still happens more or less later. Something is here now in a particular way, later it will not be. I am or have something now, later I will not. But later is the safest of all time frames. It can be safely ignored because it's not now, it's later, and later never comes. Even if it does, we don't have to worry about it now. We can worry about it later. For most of us, most of the time, impermanence seems irrelevant. But in truth, impermanence isn't later, it's now. The Buddha said all conditioned things have the nature of vanishing. Right now, as they appear before us, they have that nature. It's not that something vanishes later. Right now, everything is in some way, though we don't understand in what way, vanishing before our very eyes. Squeezing uncomfortably through the narrow doorway of now, we don't know whether we are coming or going. Impermanence may be a deeper thought than at first we appreciate. So that sense of impermanence is happening now. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in the sense of daily life, but I do, in the sake of maybe time, I'll just share the one story from Natalie Goldberg, because this is one of my favorite books. And you may know Natalie Goldberg as a writing instructor. If you've ever participated in her practice of writing down the bones, is a famous book that she wrote about kind of automatic writing as a mindfulness practice. But she was also a Zen practitioner and still is. And so I can't remember where I got this uncorrected proof of Long Quiet Highway, but this is sort of her memoir about practicing Zen and becoming a writer in her younger days. And so this is about her experiencing the death of her teacher, Katagiri Roshi, who was a Japanese teacher who came over to North America, I think also in the 1960s, but he taught primarily in Minnesota, which is where she studied with him. At the end of December, right before New Year's, I went to say goodbye to Roshi. I had to return to Taos. I had a writing workshop to teach there in January. He was lying on his side in bed under a blue cover, his hands under his cheek on the pillow. He could hardly talk. He was exhausted. I tried to make light talk. Then I was afraid I'd never see him again. I tried to tell him everything. It was silly. He was tired and sick. I got up after 5 minutes and said goodbye. He said, "I'll see you again." He had never said that to me before. I thought maybe he meant he was going to live. I hoped maybe, but I knew he wasn't, not in the old way, not in his body. On Thursday, March 1st, 1990, 2 months after I arrived home, Joni called me early in the morning to tell me Roshi had died that night. I had known since the past Sunday that his death was near, and I had planned to fly out that Thursday, hoping I would get there before he was gone. I didn't. I thanked Joni and got off the phone and lay in bed for a long time thinking of nothing. Then I got dressed and packed. I arrived in Minneapolis at 10 p.m. and a Zen student picked me up and drove me straight to the Zendo. The night before, many of the students had helped wash Roshi's body. Tumo, which is his wife, so in certain Japanese lineages, the priests do marry. Tumo had generously insisted that Roshi felt that his disciples were his important children and should be present with the family for everything. They wanted a simple pine box to place him in, and they got one with a Jewish star on it. They took off the star and someone said, "Save it for Natalie." She was Jewish. For 3 days, Roshi's body was in the Zendo, and you could sit with it at any time. By the time I arrived that night, it was the end of the first day. I bowed and walked into the Zendo and went over to the open coffin. I was 42 years old and somehow had managed never to see a corpse. This was the first. I stood and looked. The Zendo was dark except for lit candles at the altar. There were many flowers. Roshi's skin looked dark and dry, and he didn't move. I just stood there. The windows near the body were opened, and the cool March air of Minneapolis filled the space. I didn't believe he was dead. I wanted to reach out and touch him and shake him. "Wake up, damn it!" I wanted to scream. And then a couple of days later, there's one more section. So after his funeral and cremation, she writes this. 4 days after the funeral, the day before I was to leave, I called Tumo and told her I'd like to come by and say goodbye. We made an appointment for 2 in the afternoon. On my way there, I stopped at Gelpi's, a special bakery on Hennepin Avenue, and picked up a beautiful raspberry cake. They put it in a white box for me bound with string. I carried it up the stairs to Roshi's apartment and presented it to Tumo. She said, "Come, let's see if Roshi wants a piece." And she brought me into his study and placed it on his altar. There was a photo of him leaning against a flower vase. "Go ahead, speak to him." I knelt in front of the altar. "Roshi, I brought you a delicious cake, raspberry from Gelpi's. I hope you will enjoy it." Then Tumo and I went across the hall to the room where I last saw him alive. We knelt down at a low table and chatted. "If he doesn't want the cake, later I will have a piece." She paused and said, "Roshi once asked me, 'When you die, what do you want to come back as?' And I said, 'As a small white flower, like you see in field.'" He shook his head. "That's so romantic. I will come back lifetime after lifetime as a monk." So I think kind of what you can hear, and Norman Fisher has a beautiful essay in here about the death of his mother, which I won't read to you, but I encourage you to pick up the book just in the sake of time. But I think what you can hear, even in his reflection on impermanence and in Natalie Goldberg's story there, is sort of 3 kind of modes of being in these bardos, these transition periods. And these are big ones. So death, transitioning from life into death is a bardo period. But there are others in everyday life, maybe childbirth, maybe making a big commitment to someone to spend your life with them. But I think what each of those stories have in common is a sense of simple presence, sort of not knowing what's coming next. Humility, being open to what's coming, and a sense of deep listening. And how often in our everyday life do we encounter people in the midst of some physical, emotional, experience of impermanence, and we're really not listening to them. We're sort of responding from a place of a frozen idea of who that person is or what that situation is. And I've been paying a lot of attention to this just in small moments because, I work a full-time job, and there's always conflicts at work. Just the other week, I was chatting with a person who I work with, and they were really upset because someone hadn't gotten back to them. They had this project on deadline. They were getting ready to go out of the office and take a much needed vacation. And they had been so responsive in this project working with this person. They felt that it wasn't reciprocated. They really took it personally, like, this person doesn't respect me. And I'm the manager. So they're like, well, what are you going to do about it? And at first, I found myself trying to give advice, trying to say, well, this is how I would handle the situation. And they just kept getting more adamant, no, that's not what this is about. This is about respect. And I realized I was just responding from a frozen idea of the situation. Oh, I can just problem solve this and make it go away. I have to go to another meeting. I don't have time to listen. But as soon as I recognized that what I was saying was not helping, and I just kind of started repeating back, it sounds like what you're saying is you just felt disrespected. This person didn't get back to you in time and you felt really stressed out. And they're like, yeah. It's so easy to not actually listen to what someone is saying, and it's so important. And so that was just a really small example of the recognition in the moment that this situation, this person is in the midst of a changing. This is impermanence right here. And if I don't pay attention, I'm not going to know how I can help. Kind of similarly, I've had the experience over the last maybe year or so, because since the pandemic happened, I've been working out of my house, and so has my husband. We have a very small little townhouse, maybe a couple of bedrooms, it's like 700 square feet. So two of us have been really never more than about 30 feet away from each other for the majority of the last 2.5 years. And I remember reading about this couple maybe a decade ago in the newspaper who, I think they were yoga practitioners, maybe also Buddhist. And they had this idea that for a year they were going to be tethered together on a 25-foot rope. And that was going to be their spiritual practice as a couple. And I thought, oh, well, I've done that. But what I've noticed is particularly interesting is this little cauldron of being around each other so much. You can really start to hear those frozen scripts when you start to respond to the person you know so well out of something that happened in the past. And it's to the point now where when I notice that I'm doing it or when my husband is doing it about something even minor, one or both of us will just start laughing because it's so darn familiar and it doesn't even really match the situation anymore. It's sort of like, where did this script come from? That's just kind of like a beautiful recognition of impermanence. There can be a lot of, I think, joy and lightness about impermanence as well. Like, oh, wow, this situation is different, and I'm noticing that it's different now. I don't have to say the same old things. So I kind of appreciate that one. And so I kind of started thinking about these as an opportunity to notice and maybe experience just a little death, just a little taste. Like, this is changing. Can I pay attention? And sort of a trinket that I treated myself to, and further evidence of my non-enlightenment, is that I bought myself this ring for my 40th birthday last year, and this was my present. And it's a little skull, and inscribed on it is a Latin saying. This would have been used in it was made with like a letter press, like you would have had on old wax sealed letters. So the Victorians were very into remembrances of death, memento mori. You've probably heard that word. And so this says, if I can read it, "Es sui sum iris," as you are, I was; as I am, you will be. And it's a little skull. So I wear that sort of my memento mori of recognizing, when are things actually changing? What's at stake here in this conversation? And a reminder of taking this bigger view. So just to sum up a little bit then, opportunities for practicing with impermanence, the big kind, the medium-sized kind, the small kind. I think those three modes of being that we could hear expressed in those stories are really important to keep in mind. So simple presence, not knowing; humility, being open; and deep listening, not responding to a frozen idea of the person or the situation. And maybe even with some practice, when we recognize that impermanence is palpable, laughing. Wow, this wasn't what I thought it was at all. And just kind of learning to just dance with it. So the last little anecdote that I will share is kind of similar to that story of the wailing chorus. For me, singing is really a way for me to kind of like bypass my thinking mind and kind of discover something else. And I had the opportunity a few years ago to take kind of a brief singing workshop at this retreat center out in Oregon. There was this couple that was traveling around performing, and then they said, well, tomorrow we'll offer this free workshop and anyone can come. And so I came, and it was me and maybe two other people. And they said, well, this is an improvisational singing workshop. And I thought, oh, no. And so I felt nervous, but they kind of eased us into it. So the woman would play guitar, and she said, just sing what color you're feeling right now. So mine was orange. So we all went around, and there's different colors. So kind of just to get used to the idea. And then over the course of maybe 45 minutes or something, we worked up to creating an improvisational song, just speaking the lyrics in the chorus off the cuff, with the prompt of, if you're looking back on your life, what song would you say? What song would you sing about it? And it was so much more just emotionally arresting than I had expected. I didn't really know what I was signing up for. But the chorus that we created together was, look how much you loved. Look how much you loved. So I encourage you to find your version of whatever that practice is that helps you just discover what's your wisdom about the most important things in this very short and impermanent life. So thank you. And I think we have maybe a couple minutes for questions or comments. I may not know the answer, but Yes, please.
It's kind of opposite of that. In Buddhism,
Here, one moment. We're going to give you the microphone so everyone can hear you better.
so my question is a little bit the complete opposite of the topic today of death. In Buddhism, is there a practice of kind of marking birth? So I'm a mom of 4. I had twin girls on March 1st. And I wasn't raised Buddhist, obviously, but there's baptism in Christianity. And I'm just kind of thinking, I'm not going to raise my 4 children the way I was raised with a Protestant religion. And how can I kind of mark it that I want them to kind of go down this path with me of learning more about Buddhism and trying to practice that. So I guess, how do I go about that? Is there a way to, is there a ceremony for that? Or,
Sure. Yeah, so I haven't performed one, but we do have like baby and child blessing ceremonies. It's not quite the same thing in that it's not meant to confer that this child is now recognized as Buddhist. The ritual that we have around formally becoming Buddhist is committing oneself to the precepts, which are the basic moral guidelines. And every year we have a group of people who do a study practice period around the precepts, and then they formally, there's a ceremony, they receive prayer beads and a Buddhist name. So like my Buddhist name is Jagwa. However, we have a very active family program that you would be welcome to participate in that has more sort of age-appropriate different introductions to, well, what are the teachings and what does it really mean to be Buddhist? How to make that accessible to children. And so I would be happy to share some information more about that program. It will be starting up again in the fall.
my 7-year-old has come on family day
Oh, great.
before the pandemic started. So he really enjoyed that.
Nice.
So,
Yeah. Does that help answer your question a little bit?
yeah. So what is the blessing ceremony?
Would you be able to speak to what does the baby blessing ceremony entail? Because I have not done one.
I've done a lot of them, but not for a long time. The children receive some simple promises that they take or their parents take for them. I will be kind. I will be helpful. I will be loving. Simple things like that. And the parents also make some commitments to help with those 3 things. They describe the characteristics of their children or their child. And there's a whole thing saying that, we do the best we can for our children because they are our continuation. And so they take forward all the values and qualities which are important to us. And then that's some of the service. And then we take a coniferous sprig and water from the altar, and we do a simple blessing with that. That's in a nutshell. Yeah.
I appreciate the topic of impermanence and death, and I have a intense story to share. I want to share it in the spirit of reverence. So take it as that. I used to work in the hospital, and one time I was given a deceased patient to hold in a room so the family could visit. The patient had poured gasoline on herself and lit herself on fire and died. And it was my job to hold the space for the family to come and see the body. And her son sat with her for a long time. And I wanted to give him space, but I also wanted to check on him to make sure he was okay in there. And so I checked on him and asked if he had any questions, and he said, yes, she's moving. And I explained that maybe it's the process of the body dying and death, and things kind of move and twitch and gases escape. And it was very difficult to explain that to him, having just met him. And sitting here, I thought about him and how I wonder how he's doing. And I wonder about her and what led her to do that. And also, when I think about this story, I'm also kind of like, well, that's what happened. It also hurts a lot. To really.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, 1 moment.
So I just was wondering if you had any practical tips. It sounds silly to ask for tips on listening. I have a coworker whose father just passed away, and I just remember when I was a teenager and my mother died, how much I hated it when people would come up to me and give me these canned like responses. But I found myself doing the same thing because we don't really talk about dying in our culture and like how to deal with that. And I was just wondering if you had any tips. Like, I really want to be there for someone, but I just don't know what to say or do. I want it to be meaningful and helpful and not just canned generic responses.
Yeah, such a good question.
What's the question?
Oh, the question was, there's a coworker whose father, right, had just passed away, and a desire to not offer a canned response when interacting with the person, an expression of sort of generic grief. I worked with a woman several years ago whose baby died when he was only 8 or 9 months old. And since then, she's become sort of this wise person about how to talk to people after they lose someone very dear to them. And one of the most important things that I learned from her is that many people think that the person who's grieving does not want to be reminded of the person who died, but there's really nothing else on their mind. And so using the dead person's name and asking about them can actually be so healing, because it gives their grief, which is really an expression of love, a place to go. And remembering when their birthday was and asking, this was, so-and-so's birthday, or could you tell me more about what they were like? So it can depend on the situation, obviously, depending on, how the person died. But I would offer that wisdom that I learned from her. But also, I suppose, there's a sense with listening of asking a real question and then actually hearing what they're going to say. So what is this like for you right now? It depends how well you know them, of course. At work, it can be a little less personal maybe, but what do you wish someone would ask you about right now? A real question, maybe. Just a thought. You're welcome. Yeah.
I guess this is just kind of asking for advice as well. But something that like I really struggle with is, especially like during the summer, I'm still a student, when there's not as much going on, I'm able to kind of start to grasp and really internalize the idea of impermanence. Do you have any tips for kind of keeping that throughout when you get busy and kind of keeping that separation? Because that's something I definitely really struggle with.
So it sounds like what you're talking about is, what does it mean to have a recognition of impermanence, even in the midst of the kind of chaos and busyness of daily life? I think it's about, for me, it's about noticing when things are changing. And it can be as simple as, if I go for a walk in the afternoon with my husband and we're taking a break from work, and I look up and I see when the sun is hitting the side of his head, there's more gray hairs there now than there were a year ago. And I think, oh, wow, time is passing. So you have to find maybe what your version of that is. It could be something really small, but maybe there's some texture to your daily life that reminds you of that. Or you could buy a very expensive gold ring, depending on what your needs are. But there's probably much more wisdom in the room about that. So maybe that's a question that we can continue in the lobby, because I think I'm probably running over time. Any final comments?
Thank you for teaching us.
You're welcome. You guys are teaching me, so it's all good. Okay, well, I will turn it over for some announcements, and then we will end with the 4 great vows.
Thank you, Deborah. You made me realize something too. I usually think of the present as a refuge from impermanence, but it's still right here, right now, and that's quite a reminder that it's important to do the things we should do in this world. I'm Samun, by the way, if you don't know my name, and it's nice to see you all again here, and a couple of new people too. Welcome, and yeah, we appreciate everyone's presence. We've got the fall season up ahead of us. There's a new calendar outside too, by the way, if you might want to check one out or take one with you. I'll give you some highlights from what I've seen coming up in the next few weeks. Family services are starting up again on the 11th of September, so about a week after Labor Day. And they're here, just in a different place. So, and sometimes we share spaces together, but if you have family, you could consider bringing them to those. We've got meditation courses coming up. There's one is overnight, and it's from Friday evening at 7 until noon the next day, and you stay overnight. Yeah, just Friday. Oh, which one? The 16th and 17th. So
September.
Yeah, good point. So a little bit after the family service. So yeah, that will be overnight, and you can stay at the temple and learn a lot about meditation and basics of Buddhism, enjoy meals together, and it's a really nice time together, especially to learn about meditation. We've got yoga classes also coming up here in the fall, and those are even sooner. So it's just, I think, the day after Labor Day, which is the 6th of September. And those go on for 6 weeks or so until the next round. And you're welcome just to stop by and just take a gander, see if it's something you'd like to do. I do. I'm looking forward to it. We've got actually some weekday practices too, if you'd be interested. They're both online. One is on Wednesday at 6:30 and 6:30
PM.
p.m. There it is, to 8 on Wednesdays. That's Song of Meditation. It's a study group, as is the other. It's Thursday mornings at 9:30 to 10, and that is called The Way of the Bodhisattva. Also today, there's already one person I know came to ask me about it, is we have Recovery Dharma, and I believe it's nearby, next door at the yellow building.
Big yellow building through the front door. Like go out, see a set of gray stairs, go up the gray stairs, go through the door, and then keep going straight and you'll run right to where we meet.
Yep, and that's at noon today, so a little bit after the service. And let's see. I know that we've got something I can comment on in relation to an announcement. Saturdays at 3 to 5, we have practice period, work practice period. And gardening is a major component of that. It's wonderful. Hope to see you come by. It's so fun. Plus, I've heard that we have some groundhogs in the neighborhood or our vicinity that like to raid the garden and eat our kale. And we found a nice way around this, I think, to sort of uninvite the groundhogs from our garden, is to get some tennis balls. I assume you drop them into the holes that they build, and they just get to the point where I'm like, okay, too much work.
Covered it with ammonia.
And you cover them with ammonia. Oh, yeah. So if you guys have ammonia or tennis balls and you want to bring them by, we'd love it for you to do that. Yeah, and also on Saturdays we have BIPOC meditation, which, if you don't know the acronym, it's Black, Indigenous, People of Color meditations, and it's online now. It's at 3 p.m. on Saturdays. It's in here too. And both. Okay, good. Yeah, back to normal. Good. So, yeah, I think that's everything, unless everyone has questions, especially Hachu.
Yeah. After every Sunday morning service, we're going to have, after every Sunday morning service at 10, we're going to have some word practice, which we call together action. That's how this temple gets to be the way it is, because we all work together to work on the garden, to renovate, to upkeep everything. So today we're going to continue some work that we've been doing all week out in the garden. And if you have 15 minutes or even half an hour, there's some special projects we'd appreciate your help with. And maybe if you can this week, that you can know that each week is going to be a possibility. And if you could help us, we'd appreciate it. This is like a community experience living here at the temple. And to get to know you, working together is one of the best ways. Eh? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and does anyone else have a comment or question? Well, good. Yeah.
So meeting in the backyard, who thinks they might be able to help for a little bit today, just so I know? 1, 2, 3, a little bit. Okay, good.
Perfect. Good. Okay. I believe that is it for today. Thank you all for everything you bring. And we also thank you for the monetary donations. That helps a lot in your time. I believe that we can actually, after the service, take the back row of meditation mats back to the corner over here and the Christians up to the front. And we'll do that after we do the 4 great vows.
Okay, so ending with the 4 great vows, please repeat after me. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate.
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
The great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
And we'll just stand and do 3 vows in front of the altar. And then as Samoon mentioned, if you have a mat and cushion that's in the second row, meaning not the row touching the carpet, a couple of volunteers can help put this away. That would be